All right, welcome into DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. We gave you a little duck quacking there a moment ago. Michael says that's your alarm clock. So if you're waking up 10 a.m. Eastern or, what would that be, 7 a.m. Pacific, go ahead and get rolling here. The alarm clock wakes you up there with the ducks there on that. So that is great stuff. We've got a fun show coming up. Mike Griffith stops by. I got some thoughts for you on Stetson Bennett. Really big statement yesterday that Kirby Smart's made that I think makes a lot of sense about Keely, Ringo, and it kind of leads us to a larger conversation. We'll get into that. I'm going to give you some more thoughts on some of the other big games here for this weekend. We're going to cover all of that. I was a couple of minutes late starting the First and 15 here at DawgNation.com today, so do you mind if before we begin our show, let me just spend a couple of more seconds here talking to these folks here at DawgNation.com, and then we'll get rolling with the show after that. Hunker Down gives you the quack quack. I continue to say there is no bigger disparity between, the very masculine sounding dog bark and the way in which that deep resonant bass just echoes through a stadium when all the dog fans start barking in unison, and the little Oregon quack quack. Like to me, who would be intimidated by this? Like, how could anybody be scared by that? Now, you get a big, snarling junkyard dog. You get those Georgia fans. We played some of the audio for you of this earlier this week, but there's no better sound than when they all just start barking at the same time. And you hear that booming, echo throughout the entire stadium. I just love it. And I can't wait to hear it on Saturday. And we will laugh at the quacking ducks there on all of that. All right, so let's do a couple more comments here. Bill Russell shouting out our buddy Neil Hondo Williamson, who's still a part of the radio broadcast. We love Hondo. Hondo is a great, great guy and one of the all-time great DGDs, to be sure. Larry Wheeler said Munson would tell you about the opposition's strength and then tell the dogs to hunker down. That's right. Hunker Down 93 also giving you the hunker down there as well. And I just love that line. I don't do the impersonations. I won't even try to, but I know I'm asking a lot from you guys, but hunker down one more time. That's just such a great, great moment. And you got to understand something, like, I'm a little too young for 82 Auburn game, which is where that line came from, or the 80 Florida game. But my grandfather, who in so many ways, my dad's dad, introduced me to Georgia football. It's these cassette tapes. I can still kind of close my eyes and sort of picture that red cassette tape with that sticker on there, Larry Munson's Greatest Calls or whatever it was that it said. And, listening to those things. And, part of this was you just having a good time listening to Larry Munson, but also as a young person, I was like, hoping that I could live through moments that were as exciting as some of those. And obviously a lot of my kind of formative years as a Georgia fan, Georgia was losing a lot of games. They'd play big games, and unfortunately they were just losing. This was not the, Herschel era. This was not, the 83 season. This was a little bit after that. And, I saw Georgia lose a bunch of games, big games, lost a lot of them. And I think for those of us who are about my age, and a lot of you are, when you finally break through, and, I'll give Coach Rick credit, when he broke through and won the SEC for the first time in 2002, that had been a 20-year drought. And when you broke through and won the national championship after a 40-year drought, I think for those of us who lived through some of the leaner times, I think it made enjoying the big times all that much better and easier. And certainly Larry Munson, a big part of that when I was growing up. Richard D said he would listen in the stadium with one earbud in so he could hear Munson. And I certainly get that. Scott Harris also in the 84 Georgia-Clemson game with the Butler 60-yard field goal that Munson never actually officially said that it was good. And I wrote about this in our Top Dogs book that, Larry Munson, from a sort of a broadcast school standpoint, did lots of things that the, professional broadcast professors would tell you was not the right way to do it. And yet no one has ever done it better because Larry sort of did it in his own way. And yeah, that occasionally meant that you're celebrating so loudly that you don't actually say the field goal was good. But I dare say anybody who listened to that broadcast that day for the great Butler kick against Clemson, they were fully aware the kick was good because Munson gave you the perfect reaction and one that mirrored the experience of a fan. And that's really, to me, kind of what it is. And after this, I promise we're going to start the show because it's already 10:06. That to me is really what it is, right? And not that I would put myself in the same category of Larry Munson. I never would. But I think about this job in sort of a similar fashion, that ultimately, I don't view this show as a job to recite the news of the day. You can read the news. You can go to DawgNation.com and read the news. It's not my job to read the news to you. It's my job, I think, to kind of narrate the experience of being a fan and to kind of facilitate a conversation that is similar to one that fans are having all across the place. That's just what we do around here. And once again, I'm not in the same category of Larry Munson, but I view the Munson thing from all those years as kind of the same thing. Technically, his job was to tell you down and distance and what the score is and to describe the play as if you couldn't see it, because unless you were in the stadium with the earbuds in, you couldn't see it. And yet ultimately, the actual job is just sort of narrating the experience of how nervous you are when it's late in the game and you feel like your team is tired and the other team seems to be fresh and they got a million fresh bodies. They keep rolling into the game. Like, that's the way that it feels to be a fan, whether it's true or not. That's sort of the way that it feels to be a fan, and ultimately that's what Larry did so well, which was narrate the experience of being a fan. And I think that's important. I think that we're better for having had that in our lives, and for those of you that are a little too young to have had that, one of the best YouTube deep dives you could ever take is going back and looking back at some of those great moments that involve him. So with that said, we're like crazy late. We've been really pretty good about starting on time lately, but today we've kind of blown through the stop sign. So a la Ronald Acuna. So let's get ready to go here. Mike Griffith stops by. We got picks on some games here for this weekend. We'll also do more of those. I'll kind of give you my rough draft picks here on the show today, and then on Friday we'll have Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews, and we'll have them all cleaned up, and I'll have all my facts and figures ready to go, and we'll give you all of that. This is a little bit of the rough draft version of that today. So we'll do that. Good stuff from Kirby on Keely, Ringo, and off the top of the show, Stetson Bennett. Obviously, a lot of Georgia fans very excited about his return after winning a national championship a year ago. And we're going to highlight one thing today. I think that Stetson unquestionably has helped lead the way for improvement for the Georgia offense. And I'm going to show you this directly here in a moment. So let's do that. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management, the official pest control of UGA Athletics.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We are getting ready for Georgia, Oregon on Saturday. So excited about that. And as we continue our preparations here, looking ahead to all the pivotal figures in the game, I think there's one name that's obviously going to get an outsized amount of attention for the good reasons, and if something goes wrong for the bad reasons, just kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to the quarterback position. That it seems like for Georgia, Stetson Bennett's sort of been this lightning rod for conversation, and to a degree that's been true, and in some respects that's been specific to the situation here at UGA. But for those of you who are just sort of big sports fans, you know this, that I don't care who the quarterback is, the quarterback's going to generate a gigantic level of conversation across the board, be it Bryce Young in Alabama or Bennett here at Georgia or NFL quarterback wherever else. Quarterbacks just create a lot of conversation. You tune into a sort of a very mainstream show like the Paul Feinbaum show. What does Feinbaum talk about? He talks about coaches and quarterbacks. You know, very rarely does a running back or a linebacker or anything else get any kind of attention on a very mainstream show like that. It's basically just coaches and quarterbacks. That's all the Feinbaum show is sort of programmed to discuss, and Bennett's kind of a guy like that. This is a very famous Georgia player. He is not probably the best player on the Georgia roster. I'd give that nod to guys like Jalen Carter and Brock Bowers. But for as good as Carter and Bowers are, I don't believe either one of them are nearly as famous as Stetson Bennett is. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're not, because Brock Bowers had 13 touchdowns last year and didn't even get nominated for the Mackey Award. So clearly a lot of folks that don't know who Brock Bowers is, but a lot of folks sort of seem like they do know something about Stetson Bennett. They know a degree about his story. Former walk-on, guy who kind of overcame what are viewed to be improbable odds to become Georgia's starting quarterback, lead the Dogs to a national championship last year. A very important personal moment for him because, as he's spoken about, he's a big UGA fan. You see the commercial that our buddy Mike Griffith showed us yesterday of Bennett kind of in his mailman attire there. Actually, I thought he was a very good actor in the commercial. If you're watching on video, you see that. Radio podcast, you can't, but you can see the full thing at the DawgNation YouTube page. But this is the kind of thing that famous people do, right? They do TV commercials and they act in commercials, and that's kind of what Bennett is. But it's also a situation now where the thing that Bennett's famous for, leading Georgia to a national championship, now that's kind of in the rearview mirror. Now you kind of turn your page to what's coming next, and you think about, okay, so what can Stetson Bennett do as an encore? And for folks curious about the game on Saturday, I think the curiosity also kind of extends to how has Bennett used this offseason where he has unquestionably been treated as the starter. How has he used that offseason to put himself in a position to lead Georgia to even more success offensively here in 2022? With that in mind, Kirby Smart, you want to go back to Monday here for a moment, was asked specifically by our buddy Chip Towers, what kind of offseason Stetson Bennett has had. What has Smart noticed about Stetson Bennett here thus far during the preseason camp leading into game week for Oregon? Smart gave you one word off the top and then went into more detail about what he has seen, what he wants to see from Stetson Bennett as you head towards Saturday. This Kirby on the quarterback.
Consistency, leadership, the things that you want your quarterback to be in terms of confidence, coachable, and understanding how to use the offense to help you. I think, anytime you got a guy that's been in a meeting room for 2 and 3 years under the same system, it helps. But the reps help more than just the meeting room experience. He's taken more reps with the ones. He's gotten more quality work against, the best we got to offer. He gets to go against the best we've got every day. And I think that has helped his growth. I'm very pleased with what he's been asked, what he's done, and what he's been asked to do. And we need him to play well. We need him to play well because he's a veteran player now.
So that's Kirby Smart talking about the growth, the consistency that he had seen from Bennett, but also that challenge to say, hey, this year in 2022, now you are the seasoned veteran quarterback, becoming that in 2021, but also stretching back to some starts you had in 2020. So Smart doesn't hold back there and saying, we need to see more from Stetson Bennett this season because that's what you ask of a player who returns as a senior, having had experience from the previous years in his career, that you're not going to ask anything different from Bennett that you'd ask of anybody else in kind of a similar situation, regardless of whatever position they play. And I think that most Georgia fans kind of understand that. Along those lines, I thought it was very interesting from Bennett this week. And this is one of the things that's kind of cool about Stetson, I believe, is that not every player likes press conferences, and it's not really the player's job to talk about his game. It's a player's job to play his game. So I don't really have a problem when players don't enjoy speaking in a press conference forum. But when you have a player that at least is willing to tolerate that, sometimes you have some really kind of cool moments. And I think one of the things that's really kind of cool about Stetson Bennett and some of his press conference stuff is that he's willing to be, at times, very honest. And in some cases, that's almost like a self-deprecating form of honesty where he'll make an evaluation of himself. In some cases, it's, admitting that, he believes in himself or, it's sort of the good and the bad. Sometimes Stetson Bennett is just very rigorously honest in some of his press conference stuff. And I think on Monday, another example of that there as well. You heard Kirby a moment ago saying what he's seen from Bennett this summer and this preseason as the unquestioned starter. Well, Stetson was kind of asked himself this week, what have you seen from yourself and how has it felt different this year leading to the start of the season than it did a year ago when not only were you not the starting quarterback, you weren't even expected to play at all. And Bennett, I think, got really honest about the journey that he's been on, which obviously culminates what's going to happen on Saturday and then the 11 games of the regular season that come after that. But this is good stuff from Stetson Bennett. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, it's a little different. Every other year, it's uncertainty, really. Last year, pretty much lucked into being able to, go out there and play to an extent, obviously. But, this year, it's, you get fall camp, you get spring, now we're here. It's game week. So I guess it kind of came, it's weird, it came faster because you're so busy in the day, right? You're so busy day-to-day practice and all that stuff, working on little things that, last year I wasn't quite as in tune because not only wasn't I the starter, I wasn't the second string guy. So I was like, well, probably won't happen this week, right? And so you get so caught up in, and the day-to-day and the little things that you kind of lose track of the overall, holy cow, it's Oregon week now. And so thankfully, I think we've handled it really well, and marked down on our calendars like we need to do this by this, but yeah, I mean, probably a little bit more excited than I was this time last year.
So I think that's really good from Stetson Bennett. I think it's introspective. I think it's honest, and like one of the things that he says there that's going to jump out of the sort of the quote from some people is, I kind of lucked into what I did a year ago, and I don't mind Stetson using the word luck right there. I mean, I think most of us kind of agree that a lot of success stories in life, maybe even our own, sometimes it's sort of about being at the right place, the right time, and then taking advantage of the moment that comes your way. That's sort of what being, we use the word clutch sometimes in sports. That's sort of what clutch is all about, right? Hey, I just happened to be in the right place, the right time, and when I had that good luck befall me, I took advantage of the moment. That's kind of what it means to sort of, sometimes build a success story, and Stetson Bennett kind of did that a year ago. And now you're curious to see, well, as you head towards 2022, what's next for him? And this is where I think that Stetson can really show you something on Saturday, and I believe that he probably will. I think when you look back on Stetson a year ago, I think you see an area in which Georgia pretty clearly got better. It's pretty clear that to me that Bennett played a role in all of this, and I don't think you should lose sight of it. Take the college football playoff in particular here for a moment. Look at 33 points scored against Alabama in the national championship game. Now, that was a defensive score that was kind of involved in that, but that's still 33 points against Alabama. Michigan game prior to that in the Orange Bowl, that's 34 points scored against the Michigan Wolverines there that day, and a day from Bennett that allowed that to happen. Y'all, it wasn't all that long ago that Georgia was struggling to score points against good teams, and the evolution of the Todd Monken offense kind of changed that. But as that offense came into its even sort of, I guess, more fully formed version of its evolution, that's Stetson Bennett being a really big part of that. 33 against Bama, 34 against Michigan. Go back to the beginning of the season a year ago when Georgia was playing Clemson. It's a similar spot to where Georgia's going to find itself on Saturday. A neutral site game against a ranked opponent. Now, to be fair, that Clemson defense in 2021, I believe, is far better than this Oregon defense probably is, and most of you would agree with that there as well. But you know the story here. Georgia didn't score an offensive touchdown there that day. This offense just wasn't quite ready to do that yet. Well, over the course of the season, they became more ready for those moments. And Stetson Bennett was the quarterback as that evolution took place. So you want to measure some year-over-year growth, not just for Stetson Bennett, but the Georgia offense in particular. Watch what it does against Oregon, a ranked team in a neutral site non-conference game to begin the season. A year ago, Georgia didn't have any offensive touchdowns. How many offensive touchdowns does Georgia score on Saturday? The number that story tells is going to speak to the growth that Bennett has shown as a player, that the Georgia offense has shown around him, and it might just be an indication that for this unit with Bennett right there at the center of it, they are in store for a very big year indeed. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good morning to you, and thanks for being with us. And thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management for making it all possible. Whether you join us at 9:45 for our first and 15 at DawgNation.com or DawgNation app there as well, or how about 10 a.m. across all the fruited plain of video platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Somebody asked me yesterday, B.A., do you ever take any comments at Twitch? We're gonna figure out how to find the show on Twitch, and we'll start taking some comments over there. So for all you hipsters and gamers and people like that watch the show on Twitch, we'll see if we can figure out where y'all are at some point in time, and we'll join you over there and start taking some comments. But no matter which platform you watch the show on, we are really happy that you do, or you listen on podcast, radio, and 960 The Ref, however you get to us. Just a really, really sincere gratitude from me about the fact that you do tune in and that you're a part of all of that. Also, big thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management for making it all possible. And listen, here's the thing you know. Breda Pest Management is the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics. It means they're taking care of Sanford Stadium and Steckman Coliseum, all the UGA athletic venues. They're taking care of all of those, so you know they have kind of this unparalleled service, but it's also the resource they have, the fact they've been in business since the 1970s, the fact they got more than 100-something employees doing great work for you. They can lean on all those resources to also provide you this great service at a better price than you're currently paying. So So take a look at that pest control service you currently have and look at the price you're being paid for that. Maybe you've got that letter in the mail that says, guess what? It's going up. Your cost is about to increase here. That's not going to be true at Breda Pest Management. When you make the switch to Breda, you're going to save instantly by doing that. They've been a big part of what we've been doing on high school football thus far this year. They're a huge part of our community. Matt's a big sports fan, loves the Dogs, but I'll probably see him on Saturday because we do see each other at games all the time. So that's the kind of company you're doing business with. Big sports fans, big dog fans, pillars in our community, but also just really good at their business and figuring out a way to provide a great service to you for cheaper than you're currently paying for. So go ahead and check out Breda Pest on that. BredaPest.com. That's BREDA. BredaPest.com. And you can find them today and switch and save money instantly when you get your pest control provisions there from Breda Pest Management. I don't think provisions is quite the right word, but you get the point that I'm trying to make there on all that with our friends at Breda Pest Management. All right, we're going to get Mike Griffith here coming up in just a couple of moments. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse here today. And yesterday, Kirby Smart spoke to the media after practice concluded, and a couple of Georgia players spoke there as well. Keely, Ringo was one of those, and I'm going to invite you to go to the DawgNation YouTube page, and you can hear everything that Ringo had to say yesterday. I thought it was really good stuff. But I want to focus for a moment, if you don't mind, on something that Kirby said about Keely Ringo. Because here's the thing is that Ringo is in kind of a rare category in that he comes back to Georgia after a year ago giving Georgia one of the most memorable plays in program history. Like, that's a big statement to make, but we know that it's true. His interception, pick six that sealed the game against Alabama, that is as big as it gets for UGA. And so now he returns to Georgia. And so Kirby was asked yesterday, I think this is an interesting question. I think it's a good answer from Smart. He was asked, hey, how do you coach a guy knowing that what he just did is the kind of thing that's going to live on forever? And I thought that Smart gave a really strong answer to a question like that. Let me let you hear it, and then I want to talk about it. This is Kirby from yesterday.
You're just honest with him. I mean, you're honest with him. He'd be the first to admit, the play doesn't define the player, and I think so many people in the fans, they want to do that, but he can't let that do that to him. Otherwise, he's limiting himself to plateauing where he is, and he can still ascend. He's a young player. He's only really played 2 years of football with us, so he has a lot of things he can improve on, and he's worked really hard on them. He's gotten so much better with his tackling and his physicality, and he continues to improve on that.
So I think that's really an interesting point from Smart. It's the kind of thing that I feel like I could speak about for quite a long time because I think it brings up a pretty interesting conversation as it relates to sports. Here's the one thing I think we all kind of understand, even if we don't quite say it out loud this way, that the thing that makes greatness great is rarity, right? Great players are great because there aren't very many players like them. Great moments are great because there aren't too many moments that conjure up the same kind of feelings as these specific moments do. And when you have an interception return for a touchdown that seals a win against Nick Saban and Alabama for a national championship, y'all, that's a great moment. And most of us have some sort of history of sports in our background. We played in high school. Some of y'all played in college. And even for people who play sports, even for people who have an athletic background, most athletes, most coaches, most people involved in sports don't ever actually achieve something that gets described as great because, once again, great is rare by definition. But Ringo did. He had a great moment. But the thing that Smart is kind of touching on there, and this is so important, is that having a great moment does not necessarily make you a great player. Now, I think that Ringo is a very good player, and he may become a great player, but the great moment doesn't make you great. The great moment is the kind of thing where, as we talked about before, sometimes it's just sort of being in the right place at the right time. Like, I'm a huge Braves fan. Go back to my childhood in 1992 when Francisco Cabrera got the base hit, Sid Bream slid in home, the Braves got a walk-off to win the 1992 NLCS. Sid slid. It's one of the most memorable moments in Atlanta Braves history. It's a great moment. But Cabrera, the guy who got the hit, not really thought of as a great player. Sid Bream is a beloved player, but he's not really thought of as a great player either. None of those guys are in the Hall of Fame or anything like that. Great moment, but not great players. And so Keely Ringo actually kind of finds himself in kind of a situation that most athletes will never be in. he has already contributed to a great moment. And if he never does anything else with his athletic career, he can come back and do autograph shows. He's going to be featured in paintings. He'll be a part of the pregame video package. Like, he's going to live on forever. But you can turn this great moment into a great career. You can become a great player and have this be simply one of the moments in which you're remembered for. You may go on to be like Champ Bailey and put a gold jacket on one day, something along those lines. And the thing that happened in the 2021 National Championship game will simply just be one of the things that you did. So I'm sure Ringo's already cashed in on an NIL standpoint on this, and I'm sure he'll be cashing in on this for as long as his life goes on. But he doesn't have to be defined by just a great moment. He could take the step towards being a great player, and I think it's interesting that Kirby Smart says what he says about that yesterday. Before I bring on Mike Griffith, let me also remind you that tomorrow is a very big day here around DawgNation as we do our season preview kickoff event at the Marlowe's Tavern in Dunwoody, and we do it in style with the great former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, beloved former Dog, who's going to be on hand for that, talking about this 2022 season, telling stories about his own time there at UGA, what it's like to be a player under Coach Kirby Smart. This is going to be great stuff from Jake Fromm tomorrow. It's 6 p.m. at the Marlowe's in Dunwoody. That's 1317 Dunwoody Village Parkway. That's 1317 Dunwoody Village Parkway. Weather permitting, we're going to do it outside. They have a beautiful lawn out front there. That's going to be really fun. Our friends at the Finished Long Drink are going to be on hand for that. You love that. There is a chance, I've been told, we may be giving away some DawgNation Duck Hunt t-shirts, which I know you're excited about. And, of course, Jake Fromm, and I know you're excited about that there as well. So see Jake tomorrow. See me tomorrow, the DawgNation team, on hand, 6 p.m., 1317 Dunwoody Village Parkway for a great season kickoff event at the Marlowe's in Dunwoody. For now, though, as we look ahead towards that season kickoff, let's find out what's been going on in Athens, how Georgia's getting ready for Oregon on Saturday. We call this a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report. Our buddy Mike Griffith provides it for us here on DawgNation Daily. Glad to have him and all of you with us today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, say hello to Mike Griffith here. He's had great coverage from Athens, getting a chance to see some practice the other day and hearing from Georgia coaches and players over the course of the last couple of days. Mike, before we get rolling on anything else, let me bring you in on what I was just discussing. You're a sports fan. You've been around the block a couple times. You know, not every great moment in sports is provided by a player who goes on himself to be great. You know, Robert Horry hits game-winning shots in the NBA, but he wasn't the best player in any of those teams. You want to go back to ancient times before I was born, Bucky Dent hits a home run for the Yankees. He's really only remembered for that moment. You know, sometimes the great moment is not a great player, and for Kirby Smart to kind of lay it out there, hey, for Keely Ringo, do you want to be a great moment guy, or do you want to actually be a great player? It's the kind of sort of decisive, moment that most players won't get a chance to ever encounter, but Ringo does. And I thought that Smart laid that out pretty well yesterday.
Oh, no question. And I think that's a challenge for all the athletes. You wonder, have they peaked? Are they ever going to be able to do anything beyond that that's going to get them any greater fame or recognition? And that's a fair question for Keely. I do think, though, B.A., that he does look to be a first-round NFL draft pick, and certainly he'll be able to cash in on that. I mean, I'm not sure what we're going to see on the field. Kirby pointed out there were some other plays in the championship game that weren't exactly highlights, but you look at Keely's size and speed. Kirby talked yesterday about his improved physicality and tackling. I mean, he sounds well on his way to being a first-round NFL draft pick, and there's no telling what heights that he might reach in the NFL, but certainly that's a play, an oil painting moment, if you will, that I think will live forever in the Georgia history books.
And to be fair, I don't think you can discount what you just said there, which is to have a first-round cornerback, which is pretty much what all the mock drafts are saying right now, in your secondary is incredibly valuable. Now you'll say, well, there were moments in which he didn't play perfectly a year ago. I would say, Mike, at the position of cornerback, that's just the way that it goes. When you're attacked deep down the field as much as offenses attack opposing defenses these days, cornerbacks don't pitch perfect games in college football anymore just because of just how many passing plays they're being asked to defend. But when you do play the game at a high enough level that apparently you're getting this attention from NFL draft scouts, I do believe that's a very valuable commodity for UGA. I mean, I think there's a chance. I mean, certainly Jalen Carter is a first-round pick on the defensive line, something calamitous would have to happen for that not to be true. I think that Nolan Smith has the potential to be a first-round pick at the outside linebacker spot. That's a swing guy that could go one way or the other. And I think that Ringo is a very likely first-round pick in the defensive secondary. So for a Georgia defense that has to rebuild itself here a little bit, to use Nick Saban's favorite word, to have a first-round pick potentially at all three levels of the defense, that's a pretty good building block towards that rebuild, I would say, if it does kind of play out that way.
Yeah, no question. It is a defense with a lot of talent and just needs experience, right? You start right out against an Oregon team that's going to know how and where to test you, and that's kind of what makes this opening game so intriguing.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I talked about Stetson Bennett before you joined us there as well, and I think one of the things that's going to be interesting to see is in a similar spot to where Georgia found itself a year ago. Last year, neutral site game, non-conference opponent, better defense will be playing on Saturday by a long shot probably, but still, it's a similar comparison. Georgia didn't score an offensive touchdown there that day. Well, you look at the last couple of games for Georgia, once again against ranked opponents in kind of a neutral site fashion, playoff game against Michigan, national championship against Alabama. We have the defensive score in the Bama game, but you're still above 30 points in both those games. I think this is a good moment for Stetson on Saturday to show his growth over the course of the last year, for Georgia as an offense to show its growth in year 3 under Todd Monken. What can you go out and do offensively against Oregon? I've made no secret about this, Mike. I think that Georgia's going to have a good defensive day on Saturday. I truly believe that's the case. But how much offense can Georgia show and kind of demonstrate year-over-year growth, kind of demonstrate year-over-year growth for Todd Monken as he enters his third season here on the job? It could be a pretty interesting measuring stick to see exactly what this Georgia offense, I think, is bringing to the table.
Yeah, I'd say so. And obviously it's complementary football, so I don't want to get too, wrapped up in just, one element, because one hand does wash the other. I mean, you look at the Georgia offense in the SEC championship game, and it was pretty comparable to what it was in the national championship game at the end of the day. The difference was the defense, clearly, was much better in the national championship game than it was in the SEC title game. So now this year we're kind of changing the script a little bit. We think, we don't know, but we think that the offense is going to take more of a lead role in this, and we'll see more four quarters, right? I mean, it's hard to judge Stetson in his entirety because, like Todd Monken said, there were a lot of second halves that, Georgia shut it down. I mean, my goodness, Brandon, they'd still be scoring against UAB if Kirby hadn't pulled the plug. I mean, Stetson was, 10 of 12 for 280 yards and 5 touchdowns in the first half. He had 5 touchdown throws in the first half. So, goodness, that could have been, Georgia could have put up 60 or 70 points that day. This season, I wonder if Kirby is more aggressive, keeping his foot on the gas for a couple of reasons. One, a younger defense, that needs to grow into the season, and I think it will. I mean, the talent is very clear. But two, let's just say it, recruiting, the Arch Mannings, the receivers that are show the world that, yes, if Kirby has the offensive players that he feels comfortable with and the game plan calls for it, you can put up as good as offensive numbers at Georgia as anywhere else. And I think that's something that needs to happen. I think if there's an image issue, Georgia has not had a Heisman Trophy finalist since 1992. That does matter to players more than ever. NIL era. I think Kirby's going to have the offense on display. So, and I think Stetson's going to be a big benefactor of that. He's worked really hard in the off season with his footwork and to improve the velocity on his passes. And Dan Lanning's going to put him to the test right out of the gate. He's going to try to jam up the middle of the field and make Stetson make those difficult second-level throws. Not arm strength, arm talent, timing, velocity, footwork from within the pocket. Lanning's going to do everything he can to test Stetson, and Georgia knows it. And they've been working on all that stuff this whole off season. So I'm excited for Stetson to have this opportunity to show everyone how much he's improved.
Okay, so I want to have this conversation with you because I think you and I actually agree on this maybe more than it might seem, but I have a different perspective in one area. So you say that the Georgia offense needs to kind of turn it up a little bit, and you talk about recruiting as one of the reasons why. I don't disagree with that. But Mike, the one thing that I think you and I are a little bit different on is like I don't see a ton of value in doing this stuff late in games. Like let's say that Georgia had scored 100 points against UAB. I'm not really quite so sure like what that would have meant overall. Would that have made Georgia a better team in that particular situation? However, the one thing that I think that Georgia should do, and this kind of goes to what you're saying. Like you say, hey, Georgia just needs to kind of turn it up offensively more. It benefit recruiting, and it might help the defense. I agree with that. But the place I think they need to turn it up, Mike, they just need to be more aggressive in the red zone. They need to throw more in the red zone. And listen, I think that Georgia should believe in Stetson Bennett. I believe that it probably does. But as I've said on this show before, if you do, Mike, if you're Georgia and you believe in Bennett, then turn him loose in the red zone. Last year, Georgia was like the national average, somewhere around 70th, 65th, 70th in the country when it comes to red zone trips resulting in touchdowns. That Georgia just didn't convert red zone trips into touchdowns at kind of a national elite level a year ago. They were still 8th nationally in scoring, but they weren't turning those red zone trips into touchdowns, which means they could have scored even more points potentially. They would have also taken some more risk and may have come out with 0 points. But they could have even scored even more points had they been a little bit more aggressive, I believe, in the red zone. So you say that Georgia needs to turn it up offensively. I don't disagree with you on that. My point would be, don't do it in the garbage time of a fourth quarter against an overmatched opponent. Do it in the red zone early in the game when you have a chance to really throttle somebody at the very get-go. Be a little bit more aggressive when you get into that kind of scoring area. That's the place, Mike, where I think that Georgia has a chance to have a value at offensively.
Well, I think this year they do for sure. But a couple things about that, though. You're also playing, last year was very unique in that you had a world-class defense. And the only way you were going to really lose games last year is if you turned the ball over. The SEC championship game was a prime example. As long as you didn't beat yourself, you were going to win every game. And we saw that in the national title game. I mean, for 3 quarters, the Georgia offense pretty much stopped. But the defense was so darn good that there was time for that offense to finally get it fired up. And, in fact, the only Alabama touchdown came after a turnover, right? So when you have a defense like that, you're more reluctant to take chances, and I think that's why Georgia may have been somewhat conservative. Just get those 3 points. You got to if you're only giving up 6.9 points per game, as Georgia was in the regular season, kick that field goal, get those points. Don't take any chances. Don't give them any life. Just get that championship defense on the field. Now, as far as late in the game and how you go about it, here's where I think it's a little different. I think you had Terrence Edwards on and talking about this before. Jermaine Burton had a game where he had 8 catches for 197 yards. It's a receiver's dream. The next week he caught 3 balls. He's at Alabama right now because you don't throw the ball enough, right? You're not receiver friendly. Meanwhile, Dejon Edwards has 13 carries in the fourth quarter. To me, I think I'm putting the backup quarterback in and I'm feeding those receivers because receivers play that position because they want to catch passes. It'd be like if, someone hired you and didn't put you on air. Brandon Adams is on air. That's what he does. He's an on-air talent. What are we doing? Got to mow on the lawn. You got to give your receivers some sugar. You got to feed these guys. They want to catch the football. They're afraid to come to Georgia. What do you mean? You want to go to Georgia and be the leading receiver with 28 catches? Look at the receiver numbers last year. You could add up Ladd McConkey and Jermaine Burton, your top 2 pass catchers last year, and not equal and barely equal what Brock Bowers did by himself. In the SEC title game, you threw it to Brock Bowers 16 times. He was targeted. He made 10 catches. He's incredible. I'm not arguing that. I mean, heck, he's the best player on the field. He was the offensive MVP. But you could combine all the receivers' targets in that game and not equal the tight end. And these are not unique metrics to me. These are the metrics that are keeping receivers coming from Georgia. Yeah, but Terrence said that. Even if you're a team player, these guys do pay attention to the numbers. I mean, that 1,000-yard receiver thing, 2003. So I think this is an opportunity this year with a 6th-year quarterback, with I think the best offensive coordinator in college football, with a dynamic offensive line that I think is also the best in college football, and some great targets. My goodness, how in the world is anyone going to cover Eric Gilbert and Darnell and Brock and A.D. Mitchell? And, this to me is a year where you could really showcase what Georgia can do throwing the ball.
Okay, but if you threw the ball to Burton when you could have thrown it to Bowers, to me, that'd be a huge mistake because Bowers is just a better player. Bowers had 13 touchdowns a year ago, Mike. I think that Brock Bowers was probably the third best wide receiver in the SEC last year and probably one of the 5 or 6 best receivers in the entire country. There wasn't a receiver in Ohio State that had more touchdowns than he had a year ago. He and Olave had the same number. Garrett Wilson had fewer. That the reason why Burton got less touches than Bowers is because Burton's an inferior player.
Yeah, I agree, and that's not the argument. The argument is what are you doing in the fourth quarter? I agree. You get the ball to your best player, every good game plan. But I'm saying, what do we do in the fourth quarter when we see Georgia, with a 10-point lead? Are you going to hand off to Dejon Edwards 13 times? Or are you going to put in Vanda Griffin back and give them some experience and get these receivers some touches and not use up Brock Bowers so that he's injured by the end of the year? He wasn't 100%. I mean, my goodness, he was like a battering ram. And there were times I felt in season, in the fourth quarter of games, that Georgia would have had opportunities to play young quarterbacks, A, or B, get the ball to receivers. Again, Dejon Edwards is a great player, but your fifth-string running back had 13 carries in one game, and your elite receivers only had 3 or 4 catches. All I'm saying is when you have the opportunity to get the ball to these guys, to keep them happy, to keep them in the program, to recruit to that. I'm by no means saying force it to anybody. Don't force it to Jermaine Burton over Brock. My goodness, that'd be ridiculous. I just said Brock Bowers was the MVP of the team. But as Todd Monken said, if you put more 3 tight end formations on the field, you're going to have a line in the transfer portal of your receivers. So Todd Monken is aware of that. And now it's just a matter of Georgia rectifying that, I believe, by showcasing their offense. I think it's okay to put points up. And one more argument, Brandon, while we're at it, final argument on this, 2018, Georgia was left out of the college football playoff with 2 losses. Now, there's never been a 2-loss team that's gotten in. I recognize that. But that Georgia team in 2018 that Jake Fromm quarterbacked was definitely better than the Oklahoma team that was down 28-0 at 16 minutes against Alabama. But they didn't win the beauty contest. And as long as we have a college football playoff committee, the numbers, the statistics, the lopsided margins, those things do matter beyond recruiting. They matter if you're trying to lobby your way in to a 14 playoff. Let's just hope that the playoffs expand soon and we don't have to worry about some closed door meeting, and what Subway sandwiches and throwing darts at a billboard, a bullseye at with the Oklahoma AD, getting his team in. Let's just hope these playoffs expand.
Okay, I want to do some rapid-fire stuff with you to kind of close this out. We'll do that in a second. Let me first remind folks, though, this is our Georgia Farm Bureau Practice Report, our Insider Update with Mike Griffith. And we're happy to have him on the show, happy to have Georgia Farm Bureau with us there as well, because Georgia Farm Bureau can really do some great stuff for you when it comes to insurance products like your home insurance and your auto insurance. And the reason why they're able to do that is because Georgia Farm Bureau agents live and work and do life in communities just like yours across our state. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. That means they're working hard to save you money and provide you good insurance with a vehicle that helps get you to work and the home that you raise your family in. Georgia Farm Bureau understands all of that, keeping their promise no matter the storm. That is what Georgia Farm Bureau is always about. So find them online at gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com, and find out all the ways in which they can benefit you when it comes to great insurance products, your home insurance, your auto insurance, all of that from our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. So make sure you check them out today, gfbinsurance.com. All right, Mike, let's do a couple of rapid-fire things here just really quick to kind of set the stage on Saturday. Kenny McIntosh very buzzed about here this summer in this preseason. How big of a season do you think McIntosh could be in store for based on what's been said about him over the course of the last couple of weeks?
1,000 yards. I think DeAndre Swift-like.
That's very good. That's very interesting to be able to hear. How do you handicap what's happening right now for the Georgia offensive line? Seems like Ratledge is healthy at right guard. What do you see happening there at left guard?
I'm still not sold on Ratledge. I think he's healthy enough, but I just don't know if you press the issue. This is the only really challenging opponent you have till October. Left guard, I guess I would go with you hear between Willick and Truss.
Sure.
I'm going to go with Truss because it's an opener and he's been there before, but I think you're going to see both of them a lot.
We've talked plenty about Jamon Dumas-Johnson. What do you think about the other inside linebackers, whether it be like a Smile Mondon or, there's occasionally been a little bit of buzz about Tresman Marshall or Xavier Sori. How do you feel about the other inside linebackers beyond Jamon Dumas-Johnson?
Well, Kirby sent Smile Mondon out to talk to the media, so I'm going to take that as a sign that that's who the head coach might be starting there.
You get the sense that the two best freshmen on this defense right now might be Mikael Williams and Malachi Starks. They certainly seem to be the most buzzed about here at the moment.
There's no question. I also wonder, Kamari Lassiter's a sophomore. He's not a redshirt freshman. Yeah, I absolutely think you're right about that. I mean, Kirby's really high on Starks, as high as I've ever heard him on a freshman DB. And Mikael Williams just sounds like he's ready to go into takeover mode.
And then the last thing is this. You and I talked about Brock Bowers a lot a moment ago. It's a very deep Georgia tight end room, and there are a lot of guys that could potentially have very big seasons. I get the impression that maybe of the non-Brock Bowers category, that maybe Darnell Washington's had the best preseason. Is that the sense that you get from obviously being in Athens every day?
Yeah, no question. Darnell's a grown man. It's a business trip. He's ready. He's healthy. It's going to be exciting to see him in the race. Speaking of red zone, Brandon, There you go. There's your guy. Look for zero. Throw it in the middle of that big zero, or heck, throw it 8 feet up in the air. This guy's going up and getting it, and I think Darnell, if this was fantasy football, he'd be one of the top tight ends I'd be drafting because I think he is a red zone nightmare matchup. I think he's virtually unstoppable in the red zone.
Mike, good stuff. Thanks for helping us cover this game on Saturday. Georgia, Oregon, your Georgia Farm Bureau practice report, a big step in that direction for us. So we'll look forward to speaking to you here very soon. I will see you in Atlanta on Saturday, and we'll read more from you at DawgNation.com in between.
Thanks, Brandon.
Wow. Mike got the fight song playing.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so just kind of rehash this just for a second here. Like, I don't disagree that Georgia, it would do Georgia some good to turn the dial offensively just a little bit more. They were, 38, 39 points a game a year ago. I said before, I'd like to see them get to 42 here this year. I don't think that's an unrealistic goal. Now, they're going to go score 42 on Saturday. Maybe not this particular Saturday, but for a season, can they score 42 per game? I think they could. And I think that, there are some moments in which being aggressive would do them some good. Kicking around a lifeless opponent in garbage time is meaningless to me. It's just meaningless to me. And if you're the kind of player that pouts because, they're not feeding you, late in the game against a beaten opponent, then I don't know what that says to me about you necessarily, if any Georgia player would ever do that. I just think that garbage time just gets overrated a lot. And frankly, I don't know that you're going to find any team anywhere that's doing very much with its garbage time, because in a grind of a season, all you want to do is get out of the game. Like nobody wants to take an easy win and make it harder than it needs to be. If you're up big, you want out. And for the most part, everybody kind of runs and chews clock. And when you have an easy win, you take yes for an answer and you move on to the next week. But that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities for Georgia to kind of make some decisions differently. One of the things I'd like to see them do, and y'all watch this yourself, when Georgia enters the 20-yard line on Saturday, when it is in the red zone, see what they do. Is it a team that's running the football? Is it a team that's willing to kind of throw the ball up to a Darnell Washington to use those tight ends to get really creative right there? Obviously Todd Monken, we believe, is a very sharp offensive coordinator. Well, that's the place to show your intelligence. That's the place to show how smart you are by what you're able to dial up. So you want more points from Georgia? The stats would tell you that the red zone is the place where they can get them, because that's the one area, one of the very few areas, I think a year ago, in which they were kind of below the National League category, almost across the board, both sides of the ball, special teams included. Georgia pretty much plays at a national elite level. That's how you win national championships. You have to be basically good everywhere. But they weren't really very good in the red zone, about national average, 60th something in the country in terms of converting those trips into touchdowns. And so that's something to watch for going on Saturday. You want more points? That's the place I believe the points are going to come from. Now, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I'm laughing here because I got the same tweet from a few of y'all yesterday as it relates to Royal Caribbean. I'm going to save this and show this as a part of our Golden Shoe later on this week. But it's funny. Some of y'all definitely know me very well now. And I'll show you more about that as we kind of go through the week. You know, I love Royal Caribbean's what a lot of you know. And I was thinking about this. There's that, you talk about life just kind of working out well for you. It's like I got a great college football season to enjoy right now. Terrific high school football season there as well. And when that's done, it's cruise time. I'm going on a cruise in December. I'm going on a cruise in February. I'm maybe going on another cruise after that, which I'll look forward to telling you more about as we kind of get ready for that. So I've got at least 2 Royal Caribbean cruises booked right now. May have a third before you even know it. And that is just a great way to be. So love college football, and I love cruising once the season's done. Can't wait to be doing that again. And my invitation to you is to do the same thing. You can check out our friend Jessica Slater. She works for Dream Vacations, and she knows Royal Caribbean so well. She's been on a million Royal Caribbean cruises. She has all the experience that she can give to you to help you book the perfect Royal Caribbean cruise vacation for yourself. So give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. Or check her out online at blah, blah, blah. We'll edit that out. dreamvacations.com/J-Slater. We actually won't edit that out, but you get my point. dreamvacations.com/J-Slater. You can check her out. By the way, our friends at Royal Caribbean are also going to be with us this year for the DawgNation postgame show. A lot of you like following the scores for the other SEC games while we're doing the postgame show. So we're going to go cruise around the SEC with some pretty important SEC scores as we do the postgame show on Saturday. So fun to have Royal Caribbean as a part of that on our DawgNation postgame show there as well. And speaking of the SEC, let's go cruise around the SEC right now. I saw where Lou Holtz, who's the former Notre Dame coach and a former national champion there with the Fighting Irish, said something very interesting this week. He was talking about how that when Brian Kelly was Notre Dame coach, that when Holtz would write him letters and things like that, that Kelly never responded. I want to show you the quote here. So Johnny Congdon reports this on Twitter. Holt says, I wrote Brian Kelly maybe 8 positive letters during his time at Notre Dame, and I go to the mailbox every day hoping to find an answer. First of all, I think it's kind of quaint that Holtz expects all this correspondence to take place via written letter, as if it was the Civil War. But nonetheless, he says he never responded to any of them. Which, listen, I think it's very easy to sort of picture how this plays out, right? Like Lou Holtz is he's a very earnest, sincere man. You know, you saw him on ESPN years ago. You kind of seen some of the speeches that he does. And I'm sure if you're Brian Kelly, like, I don't have time to see the magic trick. I don't have time to see, the stuff that Holtz is always doing. I don't have time to do all that. I'm trying to run a program here. But when you're the head coach at a place like Notre Dame or a place like LSU, where Brian Kelly is now, you're sort of supposed to play the game here a little bit. And part of the game that you have to play is you do have to kind of like, cheese with the old coach and show the photo off and, all that kind of stuff. We see everybody doing this all the time. Other day I saw Mike White, the new Georgia basketball coach, posing with Hugh Durham. Not to say that he wouldn't want to do that, but whether he wants to or not, that's just what you got to do. You've got to show respect for the history of the program that came before you, especially when the guy that came before you did something that Brian Kelly never sniffed doing, which win a national championship, because in the 3 chances he had his best shot at that, 2012 BCS title game, a couple trips to college football playoff, he got dragged all over the field. So maybe you ought to bend the knee to Lou Holtz a little bit because he knew how to win a national championship and you didn't. I don't care how corny he is or anything like that. That's just what you got to do. And this is the kind of stuff that Brian Kelly just kind of hasn't done. I've told you before. I think Brian Kelly's a pretty good coach. I think his history of winning games when he's favored, winning games against unranked competition, I think this sort of speaks to the kind of coach that doesn't really lose to bad teams. That's one of the hallmarks of being a good coach, that when he's playing in a game he's supposed to win, generally speaking, Brian Kelly's teams have won. And being a good coach at a good program, which LSU is, the last 3 coaches that have been there have all won national championships. That ought to be a good marriage. But if you're Brian Kelly, you have to be very careful that your ego doesn't mess this up. Because the same guy that never returned Lou Holtz correspondence is likely to also rub somebody the wrong way at LSU. And if you don't think they won't dribble you like a basketball and pass you right out of that program, you are kidding yourself. So Brian Kelly is at LSU because based on the standard of winning a national championship, Kelly failed at Notre Dame. Kelly realized it was never going to happen for him, and so therefore he had to exit LSU to get the thing that his current coaching resume doesn't have, which is a championship. By that standard, he needs LSU more than LSU needs Brian Kelly. Yes, LSU likes to make the big hire, spend big bucks, and bring in kind of the flashy name. But Brian Kelly's not the only guy they could have potentially done that with. He's just the guy that took the job because Lincoln Riley was too scared to. But nonetheless, Kelly still needs the talent and the resources that LSU provides, because what Notre Dame provided wasn't enough to help Brian Kelly win a championship. He needs Baton Rouge more than Baton Rouge needs him. And let's watch and see this year, next year, let's watch and see if Kelly's ego can be contained enough to realize that, you know what, this is a place where I better show some respect for history, better show some respect for people who've done it better than I've done it. And I think it remains to be seen if Brian Kelly can actually do that there. I saw where Kyle Whittingham, the Utah coach, we'll talk more about this game in a moment, and I saw where Kyle Whittingham, the Utah coach, in talking about Anthony Richardson, was talking about how he's like Cam Newton, basically. You know, big guy, can throw it, and we know how dangerous Newton was for Auburn in 2010. We don't like Auburn. A lot of you don't like Newton, but you can't deny that he was a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the quarterback position. I mean, that's just a fact, right? It's just true. And when Whittingham looked at Anthony Richardson, he said, I see the same kind of guy. This is a Cam Newton-level player for Florida. And listen, I think there's a chance that Richardson probably does have a pretty good year for Florida. I think one of the biggest mistakes that Dan Mullen made at Florida is not embracing Richardson more. He seemed to have a little bit of a, thing about Emory Jones, and he kind of put a lot of his eggs in the Emory Jones basket and didn't want to kind of backtrack on that. I think ultimately that's one of the big errors that Dan Mullen probably made as Florida coach. Let me just say this about Richardson, is that Richardson has always looked like Cam Newton. He's always had a big arm. He's always been a good athlete. Like, he's always had all of that. Like, this was true in high school. It's true now. Like, it's always been true. Like, you're not the first person to sort of say, oh, it kind of looks like Cam Newton. Like, people have kind of thought this before based on the way that he runs, based on the way that he throws, based on that kind of stuff. And yet, even with that athletic profile, he was still just a 3-star recruit. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that, you can't be better than your recruiting ranking shows. Gosh knows Georgia's had a million guys who've kind of exceeded their recruiting ranking. But he's always looked the way that he's looked, and he's always been somewhat doubted, whether it be recruiting industry, coaches on the Florida staff. My suggestion is there might be some reason why that's true, that maybe it's not likely to all kind of come together for him this magical season, a la Cam Newton or anybody else that's had great success in kind of a one-year story in the SEC, that when you've got all of the athletic credentials, but you're still doubted this much, there might be a reason they're doubting you. So just maybe keep that in mind when it comes to Anthony Richardson. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And by the way, speaking of Florida, Utah, that is also one of our MyBookie best bets here for the upcoming week. Now, we're going to make these picks officially as a part of our Go With The Flow later on this week on the DawgNation video channels. That's actually going to air on a new time this season, Friday nights for my fun show, which we call Go With The Flow, and we'll do that then. These are the games we're going to be picking. I'm going to give you some early thoughts on this here right now. Georgia's at 17-point favorite against Oregon. That's the line currently found at MyBookie. I'm going to be very honest with you here. I like Georgia a lot in this game, but if you're betting this, I do think the point spread matters. I'm not taking Georgia above 17 and a half, getting into 18, things like that. I think you're getting into a pretty rich price on Georgia there at that point. I think 17 is kind of a pretty good number here. Obviously, if you could find anything less than 17 heading towards game time, that might be one to jump on there. The bet that I like here, though, is Oregon team total under. And I'll take that at almost any price. I'll let you know I've called for Georgia shutout here, which maybe I sort of half-kiddingly, half-seriously say that. But the point is, I like Georgia defense on Saturday, and I'll see that reflected in the team total under for Oregon. That'd actually be my play there on that. Let me give you a few more of these here really quickly. Cincinnati on the road at Arkansas. They're a 6-point underdog. I like Arkansas here. I think I'll tell you more about this on Go With The Flow later on this week, but I think Arkansas is well coached. Probably got the best tandem of coordinators outside of Georgia in the SEC. I think they got a good quarterback situation working with Kendall Briles there at the OC spot. I think that Reynolds Razorback Stadium is going to be rocking there on Saturday. Kind of like the Hogs here in this spot. Utah, Florida, believe it or not, and this is not going to make a lot of you happy, but listen, when it comes to your wallet, you got to be as objective as you possibly can be. Given where the number is right now at MyBookie, Utah as a 3-point favorite, I like Florida against Utah. And I know you don't want to hear that, and as like a Gator hater, I'm not supposed to do that. But y'all, this is still a team from Salt Lake City coming into an SEC stadium week 1. The humidity is going to be 9,000%. I've got zero respect for a Pac-12 team in this spot. Zero respect whatsoever. So I hate Florida. I'm going to be cheering against Florida in the game. Was certainly never bet enough on it to make it be where I couldn't cheer against Florida. But in terms of the integrity of the pick and in terms of trying to be as fair and balanced as possible, I think Florida +3 is actually a pretty good play right there. And frankly, Florida ought to be ashamed of itself if it gets beaten in its own stadium by Utah. I don't care what the Utes are ranked. Notre Dame 17, Ohio State. Just keep this in mind about this game. We'll talk more about this. Keep this in mind. New Notre Dame coach, very, very aware of this point spread against Ohio State. It came up around the NFL draft. And there is a way to coach yourself to a game that's less than 17 points. And it would not surprise me as kind of the Irish sort of begin a new era here. They kind of look to do that. I think that I would never expect it to be a close game where Notre Dame has a chance to win. But could Notre Dame keep it closer than the experts think in terms of 17 points? I think the Irish could be worth a look there on that. I'll also take LSU over Florida State. That game's in New Orleans on Sunday. So I would take LSU there on that. That number stands at 3 points right now. Now, you are probably better at picking games than I am, and if you are, you can put your money where your mouth is and make a little bit of cash for your expertise. Our friends at MyBookie allow you to do that. You can find them online, mybookie.ag. You can bet on anything, any place, anywhere, anytime, whether it be college football games, heading towards the NFL, regular season baseball. I'm talking about, props and money line and over, unders. You want to bet the spread. You can do all of that with our friends at MyBookie. And when you use the promo code DawgNation, you're going to get a big 100% deposit bonus on your initial deposit. That means when you sign up, you throw in like $200 in your account, they're going to give you $400 right there, right away, just for doing that. That's what MyBookie's kind of famous for, taking good care of their players. So you put in $250, you got $500 because they're going to double whatever you put in as a way of thanking you for setting up an account and playing with MyBookie here this fall. So get ready for all the fun stuff with MyBookie all season long, but you've got to use the promo code DawgNation to take advantage of it. DAWG is how that's spelled. DawgNation. Use the promo code there. Get a big deposit bonus when you sign up with MyBookie today. Hey, one more thing too before we wrap this up on this show today. I've already gotten a lot of great ones for this. But don't forget on Friday, we'll close at the weekend style. And this week, you better believe we'll be doing that. We call it the Big Finish, presented by the Finish Long Drink. We love weekends around here. We love football weekends especially. And the Finish Long Drink, always a big part of the weekends that we are a part of. And so a lot of you are the same way. And you've sent some great photos of us, of yourself enjoying that Finish Long Drink. So hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, and we'll kind of show you off on Friday for our big finish to the week, courtesy of the Finish Long Drink. And if you haven't tried it yet, you should. Go to thelongdrink.com, and you can find out where you can pick some up. Try the cranberry, the Long Drink Strong, which 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long Drink Zero, that's no carbs, no sugar, but still 5% alcohol by volume, which is a really cool thing. How about the Long Drink Traditional? That's the grapefruit flavor. It's got the gin kick. It's the blue can. I love that. Whatever you enjoy, you're going to get it with our friends at the Finish Long Drink. And by the way, if you've never tried any, come see us at Marlowe's on Thursday. The Finish Long Drink going to be there with us. Come, if hopefully you've got tickets already to be a part of our Dog Nation Duck Hunt tailgate on Saturday, because the Finish Long Drink, is going to be a big part of that. If we're having a big tailgate, our friends at the Finish Long Drink are going to be a part of that for sure. So you can try some there, and maybe you can be a part of our big finish here, presented by the Finish Long Drink each and every Friday on Dog Nation Daily. So last night we had a fun call-in show, or as we like to call it, kind of an interactive live show with folks joining us on a video for that, including our buddy Mad Dog, who was, I believe, our last caller last night, and a terrific submitter for our golden shoes there as well. Let's see Mad Dog here. This is good stuff. He says, coming soon to a football stadium near you, it's the Georgia Predator. How does it feel to be hunted? Well, guess what? That's what Georgia's going to be doing. And Kirby Smart said, listen, we will not be hunted as national champions. We're going to be doing the hunting. We are the hunters. And that's good stuff to consider. And that's a great message there from my buddy Mike the Mad Dog. We've had a lot of great golden shoes. This is the time of year where I start to get a little bit behind on our golden shoe submissions, so I'll catch up on those as we head towards the week. But Mad Dog, very deserving on that today. How about Gator Hater Updater? 4,983 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have won a national championship. And 59 days from now, They're going to take another loss to UGA. Now, they may beat Utah week 1, but they ain't beating Georgia 59 days from right now. So we'll see you then there for that. It is our Gator Hater Updater and our Gator Hater Countdown. And back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. By the way, tomorrow we have a very fun special guest that's going to join us for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. This is going to be kind of a cool thing that we're going to be doing here this season. I'm actually really excited about this, and I think I'm going to save it for you and just sort of tell you more about it tomorrow. It's unlike really anything we've ever done before, but it's going to be a big part of our cool downs. I think it's going to be tomorrow, but normally I think it's going to be on Friday. So it's going to be just a fun thing. So that's going to be really fun. And we'll tell you more about that as we get ready for it there tomorrow. But for now, let's get your comments. I was a little late getting to Facebook yesterday, and I don't want them to be upset. So let me go to Facebook first today, and then we'll kind of bounce through, and we're not going to go crazy long on comments today. I apologize for that, just because we actually did go pretty long yesterday, and we're trying to keep a little bit of a schedule around here. So let's see. Zach Adams says, ain't Jake jumping back in tomorrow? We'll see Jake live on video tomorrow night from Marlowe's Tavern, but it's almost like I kind of want to save it for the Thursday night deal. So if you can't be there, I hope you'll tune in and watch. But I didn't want to, just to be completely frank, I didn't want to give the whole store away, prior to the Marlowe's event. So we'll hype it up that he's going to be there, but we want to kind of create a little bit of anticipation for it. That's kind of that deal there. Ryan Walker says, I need my duck clean, seasoned, fried, and smothered with some rice and gravy. I'm right there with you on that. I like that. Woody Fairley calling for 2 Kenny McIntosh touchdowns against the Ducks. I'll take that there as well. Matt Rugavina says the Yardbird's going to be doomed with the Rattlesnake Man as their quarterback. Yeah, you may be right about that. Nick Roundtree says it's like waiting on Christmas to see Georgia play. I know that. We're all getting there. Ken Feinberg says no mention of West Virginia Pitt. It's actually probably the game I may be, outside of Georgia, it may be the game I'm most excited about, but this has been the source of much internal debate. So I have a tendency to pick a lot of games for our Go With The Flow show, and I have been told by some, they'll remain nameless, but I've been told by some that we pick too many games. So we're trying to keep the show to a little bit of a manageable length, which means we're trying to limit it to 5 picks. So when you limit it to 5 picks, you're going to miss out on the chance to pick a game that we want. So that means no backyard brawl. So we won't be picking the backyard brawl. Now, here's what we are going to do, though. So this is the compromise that I have brokered for Go With The Flow. Because last year we'd pick 10 or 11 games, and there was some internal strife, workplace drama. People thought it was too many games. Some people did. So we're limiting it to 5 games. But here's what we're going to do. So if you watch the show on Friday, and honestly, the MyBookie Best Bet segment we do on the show is reflective of the games that we're picking, because we want to make the same graphics once. We don't want to make them, a million different graphics. But the point here is that we're going to pick 5 games every week on Go With The Flow. And that's going to be what our record is based on for the season. We always kind of keep up with that. So the record is going to be based on the 5 games that we pick. But this is going to give people a chance to kind of extend themselves if they would like. We're also going to give you a chance to make a best bet on the show. Best bet on the show. And actually, I just thought about this. That also means I'm going to have to put this out to the audience. Okay, I got to figure out how to do that. We're going to see if we get some of y'all that like making picks. We may give you a chance to do a best bet on the show, because we do an audience thing on Go With The Flow. So we'll do that. So what I was saying anyway is that on the show, for the people who say I want to pick backyard brawl, I want to pick, whatever you want to pick, we're going to give you a chance to make a best bet from anything across the board. So that's the story there on that, Ken. Sandy Price says, as a Gator hater, it was sweet to see the Dogs defense breaking in Anthony Richardson with that smash sandwich. I like you on that. I hear you on that. That's sure enough true. Basil says, that he went back and watched the Georgia Auburn games of the past, and when you go back and watch those, you see a lot of Bo Nix getting beaten up. Martino Dog says, how about some duck meatballs with some duck fat fries on game day menu? Go Dogs. That doesn't sound too bad. That doesn't sound too bad. Let's see what else. Gerald says, love me some BA, but how about talking about more about all SEC Warren Mclendon rather than Stetson Bennett? He's my quarterback, but so tired of hearing about him. There's other players on the team. See, this is what's not fair. And Gerald, I totally realize that you may be not able to watch the entire time. Generally speaking, we do about 3 different topics per day on a show like this. And this is Wednesday. So by now we've done about 9 topics, give or take. When I think about how kind of slot the show, we do about 9 Georgia-related topics. I've actually only done one of those on Stetson Bennett, right? That was today off the top of the show, and that was 10 minutes. But that's the only Bennett topic that we've done. Frankly, nobody talks more about Georgia offensive line than we do. We've done that plenty. We've broken down every potential starter on this anyway, but Sunday. So listen, feedback matters to me. I appreciate people's feedback, but this is an example of what I am being accused of, talking too much about Bennett. I don't think the facts bear that out. I mean, go back and look at what we start with on yesterday's show. I forget, but it wasn't Bennett, and nor was it Bennett on Monday. We've only really done one Bennett topic for the week. So that's kind of my take there on that. Basil on the subject of Georgia State against South Carolina. We certainly saw Georgia State look good against Tennessee a couple of years ago. That's probably a game where the Gamecocks need to be a little bit careful. I would probably agree with that. Hemingway says he always cheers for the SEC. So there you go there on that. So this has just come out. This is a new NFL mock draft. Jalen Carter going 3 overall. Keely Ringo going 4 overall. Although I guess that for Carter, this is a drop down from where he was at one point in time, number 1 overall. Is this Dane Brugler? Nolan Smith going 12 overall. And Eric Gilbert going 24th overall. So how about that? That's 4 Georgia players. 4 Georgia players in the first round. 4 Georgia players in the first 24 picks. How about that from The Athletic? Oh, yeah, Anthony Richardson. So there you go. Anthony Richardson, number 10 overall draft pick. Guess what? If he's the number 10 overall pick, then Utah is in a heck of a lot of trouble on Saturday. They are in a heck of a lot of trouble on Saturday. Somehow I believe that's probably not going to likely be true, although I don't believe that we'll – like some of these NFL people are just in love with these quarterbacks that have never done anything but sort of stand there and look the part. Like Levis has got a big arm. He can throw it through a brick wall. But, y'all, he's not better than Stetson Bennett. Like, Stetson Bennett's better than Will Levis. I don't care how far Levis can throw it or whatever else. I got no interest in Will Levis whatsoever. And let me tell you this about the Kentucky offense very, very quickly here for a moment. Liam Cohen has left and gone back to the NFL. And so they hired, what's-his-face from, I think, the 49ers to come to Kentucky, a similar guy to Cohen. And my understanding is that he is going to try to keep, I think, the same offense in place that Cohen was running. This is me being as objective as I know how to be. This is me being as fair and balanced as possible. If you're Kentucky, I think you got to be really careful about that. Is it Scangarello, or is that how you say his name? Scangarello, the Kentucky offensive coordinator. Bringing a guy in, if it is true, and this is what I've been told, bringing a guy in to run the Liam Cohen offense, and I think that Cohen was a good offensive coordinator. That's why he only stayed a year. He got a better job. But bringing a guy in to run the Cohen offense is potentially very risky. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. I think that Steve Sarkisian is a brilliant offensive mind. I really do. I think as Alabama's offensive coordinator in 2020, he was a sterling play caller. But for those of you who are Falcons fans, how did it work for Sarkisian when he was here trying to run Kyle Shanahan's offense? Because that's what he was doing. He was trying to keep the same offense in place and run the same offense. This is a brilliant guy basically trying to work with somebody else's tools or work from somebody else's recipe book. And it just didn't really work all that well. It was not a good plan. And when I hear Kentucky, I don't care how sharp of a guy you pulled out of the NFL, bringing him in here and asking him to, basically order off somebody else's wine list, I just don't know how well that's going to work. So this Will Levis emergence that's supposed to take place, I'd probably bet against that occurring. And, Richardson, that just is what it is. I'll say it again. I said it in the show. Anthony Richardson has always looked the way that he looks. Always. He's always looked the part. It's the fact that the recruiting industry turned his nose up at him, the fact that Dan Mullen turned his nose up at him, even if Mullen's kind of a dunce, that has to mean something. Like some of these people who are close to him have to know something because we can all look at him and see that he clearly looks the part of a great quarterback. Also, the Eric Gilbert thing is certainly interesting because I don't know, Connor Riley reported this yesterday that he was kind of going fourth in those drills at Georgia practice here this week. So, fourth string tight end to 24th overall pick in the NFL draft would be quite a leap if that's indeed the thing that happens here. Cam Hasty says, this is way off topic, but I was doing some betting research today and saw that one, Chad Morris is back as game analyst at South Florida. That's really funny. Dan in Arkansas says, if that be the case, you better bet against South Florida. Yeah, poor Chad Morris has fallen on hard times. So, obviously, he's one of the worst coaches in SEC history, and I mean that full stop. And upon the sort of inglorious exit he had from Fayetteville, I think he tried to go back to high school. This is not a joke. I'm being serious. He tried to go back to high school because Morris at one point in time was a very famous high school coach, worked his way up the college coaching ranks, and took like a big job in Texas. And I think he only lasted there 5 minutes or something like that, and he was out of a job at Texas. So, the reason why he's working as an analyst, and I didn't realize he was at South Florida, but the reason why he's there is because his previous high school job didn't last very long for whatever reason. Cam Hasty's thinking about South Florida plus 12 with BYU coming in. That's an interesting game. I don't have a take on that, but that's an interesting game. Richard D says, in the spirit of Larry Munson, who would you predict to get the My God of freshman this year? I think Malachi Starks is the safest bet. I think Mikael Williams might be the next bet. I think that Oscar Delp is probably number 3. So for me in that order, Starks, Mikael, Oscar Delp, in that order. That's a great question, though. It's a great question. Let's see what else. By the way, I'm wearing my Eddie shirt today. I didn't even say that during the regular show. Didn't even say that. Let us go to YouTube. Let's go, Brandon, checking out today. Let's go. Appreciate you being here. Harry Leggy on the subject of Tennessee. Going back and forth with Joshua. He says, Joshua Dixon says, Georgia's offense finished top 10 last year with a generational defense. What do you think they are going to do with the roles being reversed? Well, I think it's important to note that Georgia was the only team last year in the country that had offensive and defensive efficiencies measured in the top 10 in both categories. Nobody else had that. So that's just really important to note that no team with a great defense had an offense nearly as good as Georgia's did. And of the teams that had great offenses, even better offense than Georgia, none of those teams had anywhere near as good a defense as UGA did. And by the way, this is true no matter which kind of stat you use. You can use fancy stat analytics, they'll tell you that. You can use a little bit more basic statistical work like average points per drive, how many points you give up, how many drives did you participate in. Just divide that number. On a points per drive basis, Georgia's top 10 in both categories too. So this is my ultimate sort of take on Georgia here this year. Whether they flip-flop or not, I still think Georgia's likely to be a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. I do. Georgia may regress defensively, but I have a hard time believing it's going to regress outside the top 10. I don't. But even if it regresses in the top 20, go back and look at this yourself. There aren't very many teams a year ago that had a top 10 one unit and a top 20 the other. It's just hard to play that version of complementary football. For instance, Ohio State, best offense in the country, defense somewhere around 50th. Clemson, among the best defense in the country, offense somewhere around 50th. Most teams have a pretty gigantic imbalance between the two. Georgia didn't. Alabama kind of didn't, although Alabama was nowhere near statistically as good in both categories as Georgia was. But so if you think about things changing, I still probably bet you that whatever stat you like to use, that Georgia's probably top 10 in both categories at the end of the year. And the question becomes, well, who else is? Because if somebody else is, that team becomes a real threat to beat Georgia. But, this kind of goes back to what we said a few weeks ago. There are a lot of people who think Ohio State has fixed its defense just because it's hired a new coach. But, y'all, that's giving a huge benefit of the doubt to a team like the Buckeyes. You still got to go out there and execute. You still got to go out there and do it against Marcus Freeman's team on Saturday. And you've got to play better defense. It's not just hiring a better coach. They've clearly done that. But you've got to get better results. Are they going to wave a magic wand and somehow be a top 10 defense after being 50th best in the country or 40-something best in the country a year ago? It's not easy to assume that, or at least it shouldn't be. Same thing for Clemson. That's a team that's preseason number 4, great defense last year. They had top 10 offense just because Dabo Swinney magically has sort of declared DJ Uiagalelei to be the dude at quarterback. I don't know. And so that's my thing is that, okay, so Georgia may be slightly more known for offense this year and slightly, less known for defense. But the thing that it ultimately should be known for is just being better at both collectively, complementary, than anybody else in the country is. And that's kind of the recipe for success last season. So Joshua says he thinks that Kentucky's going to field a better defense than Georgia. I don't think there's any chance that's true. And I appreciate your opinion, Joshua. I like having the conversation with you. I think that Mark Stoops is a good defensive coach. But, we just showed you. And I'm not saying you should, base your entire football opinion on Dane Brugler. But Dane Brugler's not, dog fan, blah, 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 on some message board. This is a guy that's, doing this for a living, trying to be as accurate as he possibly can. He's got, 3 guys off this Georgia defense in the top 10 of the NFL draft. That's just one dude's opinion, but it's kind of a mainstream, media type person. He's got Ringo, Carter, and Nolan Smith in the top 10 of the NFL draft. If that ends up being true, then not only will Kentucky's defense not be within a zip code of Georgia, nobody else in the SEC will either. With the exception of Alabama, of course. Uncle Sam says, good idea on Go With The Flow show. Don't give us guesses that you wouldn't bet on yourself. Connor ruled last year. He had remarkable picks against the spread. Yeah, Connor had a really good year last year. And to your point about, so you got to understand something, Sam. I get the point you're making, and I actually agree with you. But what I'm willing to do from a pick standpoint and what I'm willing to do from a bet standpoint are two totally different things. We talked about this during the show a moment ago. Georgia minus, we've seen it as high as 18 against Oregon. In a situation where all I'm risking is my reputation, then I'm going to pick Georgia, right? You can't not have a pick in a situation like that. We're kind of playing a season-long contest. So I would say the safer bet for me is Georgia minus the 18 there. Would I bet Georgia minus 18? I would not. Would I bet Georgia minus 17.5? I wouldn't. At 17, I'd consider it. At 16.5, I'd pull the trigger. At 17, just a real key number, of course. So maybe I'll talk about that a little bit more openly this year about, it's just a little, and listen, if and, when, I bet, I'm still kind of a low limit player, right? I'm not one of these guys that's, $1,000 on this, like some of y'all do, which is fine. I don't mind that, but that's just not what I would do. So even if I were making a bet, it's going to be a very, relatively small bet. It's sort of for the sport of it more than anything else. It's just kind of fun to have a little taste on a game and have a little vested interest in it. But when you have some money at stake, that's worth more than, just your good name when it comes to a season-long contest. So if the line was 18, and we're getting our lines from our friends at MyBookie, but if the line's at 18, then that's not a bet for me. Would it be a pick? Yeah, I'll make a pick there on that. I'm certainly not taking Oregon. But I've told you, if I was betting the Georgia-Oregon game, I'd be betting it in a far different kind of way. I'd be looking at more of the team total side. Jalen Jackson says, Mike is right. We can't ignore the countless amount of top wide receivers who don't come here. As long as our wide receivers are catching 3 passes for 30 yards every game, we'll never get any great ones. I think that's fine. But what Mike said is you have to sort of pile on more yards in the fourth quarter late in games. I'm just telling you right now, that is not what any team in the country does. It's just not. That's not what any team in the country does. And one of the dumbest things a coach could do is put a great receiver into a meaningless fourth quarter as a way of padding his stats and getting that guy hurt. That would be a fireable offense. That'd be a fireable offense for most coaches to do something that stupid during a game. And so, no, that's not what I want Georgia to do. Now, do I want Georgia to open it up more offensively? I think there's a case to be made for that, that there are some moments in which Georgia could take a few more shots. To me, though, that's not late in a meaningless blowout game. That's earlier in a game that's yet to be decided. And I'll give you those specific moments when I think that should take place. When you are close to scoring in the red zone, if you trust your quarterback, that's where you show that trust. Be aggressive right there. But let's also be extraordinarily clear about this, that in some respects, some of the Georgia wide receivers who've gotten 3 touches have gotten those 3 touches because they're kind of a 3-touch guy, right? I mean, in some respects, hey, maybe Georgia's not cultivating its wide receivers quite as much, but in some respects, maybe there's a 4-star guy who came through here who didn't fully take advantage of the opportunity that he was given because, let's just take Jermaine Burton here for a moment. I think that Jermaine Burton's a good player, and I don't have a bad word to say about him. But given the opportunity he had last year, compare that opportunity to Ladd McConkey. I'd say relative to the touches and the time they were on the field, I just think that McConkey did more with his moment, maybe than Burton did. That some of what happened for Jermaine Burton while I was at Georgia is actually on Burton himself. And I'm not going to trash him. I don't wish him ill going to Alabama, but we're also going to be about personal responsibility here too. And Burton was on the field a lot for Georgia last year, And if he was wide open, trust me, he would have been, feasting maybe more than he was. So, yes, I think that Georgia needs to do more when it comes to wide receiver position. I definitely do. But some of the story related to UGA and its wide receivers is not all Georgia's fault. And that's just it. Harry Leggy checking back to his beach chair. Listen, that's a good thing to be. Lesko, who I thought was checking out of the broadcast, still here, says, think back to Bama's repeat year. Murray threw a batted ball to a receiver who slipped on the turf as time ran out. They got to play a mediocre Notre Dame team. He says repeats aren't hard under those circumstances. That's a pretty good point there, too. They certainly got the benefit of a very weak opponent in the BCS title game. Jay Shipe says, is the A&M recruiting fund looked into by the IRS? When will they be releasing the funds so Jimbo can go shop for players this year? Getting late. So just let it be known, I don't think I mentioned Texas A&M on the show today at all. I don't think I said a word about A&M, but Jimbo's number one fan here, Jay Shipes, he's there to talk about him. And I don't know if he's joking or being serious, but these NIL folks, whether you're paying the stuff or whether you're getting the payments, y'all better be careful because the IRS ain't going to joke about stuff like that for sure. They are not going to joke about that for sure. BGR80T checking in. You love to see that. Jonathan Aaron, we're going to get ready to wrap up here. He says, I guess Lou Holtz and Brian Kelly were not one big happy family. Yeah, that's good. That's good, Jonathan. That's really good. He says, you think Rudy can make them friends again? Yeah, that's really funny. Wally Smith says, what's my score for the game? I'll give you, how about 27-0? That's my pick, 27-0. I got Georgia over Oregon 27-0. How about that? But as I said before, I am not confident enough in a 27-point win to bet that number necessarily. But for the fun of predictions and letting y'all give me grief when I'm wrong, I'll take Georgia 27-0. Jake Westbury says that Georgia's second team last year shut down teams. They're playing this year and they're going to be just as dominant. I mean, I do feel good about a lot of these guys. I do. Lesko going to try to be with us at Marlowe's. I'm looking forward to that. Boy, that'll be well received. That'll be exciting. All right, final comments on the other platforms, and we got to get ready to go. Hemingway kind of weighing in on the Jermaine Burton situation. Basil also about all these Alabama receivers who've gotten hurt, even going back to like Jermaine Prothro. Although Prothro, that was not late in the game, though, was it? Was that early or was that late? Maybe I don't remember. I thought that was earlier in the game. DT says he actually thinks that Georgia has good receivers this year. I mean, I think the angst is related to this, that, in the Smart era, there have only been 2 wide receivers exceed 700 yards receiving. One of those is Pickens. One of those was Javon Wims back in 2017. Now, if Pickens had been healthier throughout the rest of his Georgia career, I mean, that's very likely that he would have had very big production, and all of a sudden this idea of where's the Georgia wide receiver production? Well, that kind of went up in smoke when Pickens ended up, not being healthy last season, and he missed a decent portion of 2020, and also 2020 was just sort of a weird short year as it was. So some of the issue related to Georgia wide receiver was he just didn't have George Pickens last year. But you do have, in some cases, top 100 rated recruits that never quite flourished here, and some of those guys are still on the roster. So if I had to guess, this is probably going to be the best year for receivers. I'm talking about wide receivers in the Kirby Smart era. It's still not going to be as good as it is other places. And Georgia, just to be honest with you, Georgia does not recruit the receiver position as well as it recruits other position groups. And, you kind of want that to change. Now, do I want Georgia to reinvent the program from the ground up to make the program more attractive to receivers? I don't necessarily want them to do that, because why would you? They just won the national championship. But would you like to recruit receivers as well as you recruit anything else? Of course you would. Of course you would. So that's what it all kind of comes down to is that what Georgia has done really works. There's a reason the trophy sits where it sits. And what Georgia does that really works doesn't benefit all position groups equally. It hasn't benefited wide receivers quite as much. And now UGA is working to kind of add that in as sort of the final component on all of that. And that's just kind of the story. At Facebook, and then we're out of here. Pete Williams says, you people calling for more aren't happy now, regardless of where it was done with the national championship. It is kind of a good point, is that I think, this will be me being like a sort of a blowhard for like 2 seconds. I think some of the occasional unhappiness we see from Georgia fans, I think speaks more to their ability to be happy more so than it speaks to Georgia's ability to make them happy. I think that some people have just sort of a low joy threshold, and if Georgia scored twice as many points, something about that wouldn't quite be right either, because I think ultimately happiness is a skill, and it is not a skill that everybody has cultivated in equal measure. So I do think you're right about that. That some of what you see sometimes, and listen, I like fan conversations. I like having this conversation right now. We took a bunch of phone calls last night. I like doing that too. So I'm here to talk about what fans want to talk about. But in the back of my mind, sometimes when I hear unhappiness in what ought to be commonly defined as a happy situation, it tells me more about someone's ability to be happy more so than it tells me about Georgia's ability to make its fans happy. I think that's probably true. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah, and by the way, don't forget, we talked about Backyard Brawl a little earlier. That's JT Daniels making his West Virginia debut tomorrow night there as well. And what's funny about that is the guy on the other side, many of you are aware, this is Keaton Slovis. That's the guy that beat him out at USC. The reason why Daniels transferred is because Slovis was going to be the starter at USC, had kind of taken that job from him, and now they get to have this battle head-to-head in one of the great rivalries in college football. West Virginia fans will tell you, there's not a single team in the Big 12 they care a rip about. They don't have a rivalry with any team in that league. But they hate Pitt, and they hate like Penn State, and teams in that area. They hate those teams. Their rivals are all regional, and they don't play them as frequently as they'd probably like. So the Backyard Brawl tomorrow night is going to be pretty fun. It's going to be pretty fun. And I will be rooting for JT there. I really will. I like JT. I do. People kind of do this, and we've got to go. Y'all, I'm sorry. It was so late. Like, I saw a debate the other day about whether or not JT Daniels is a DGD. And, here's the one thing that I would like to encourage people to consider when it comes to, your sort of damn good dog DGD status. It's not always about longevity. Sometimes it's about the contribution you made in the moment. And I feel about JT Daniels very similarly to the way I feel about Jacob Eason. I think they're both DGDs. And my reason for like saying, hey, JT Daniels, he's a DGD. It's not because he threw for 8 gazillion yards against Mississippi State. Ultimately, that game doesn't mean a ton to me. My reason for revering Daniels is he was a good dude last year in a very, very tough situation. He was the starter at the beginning of the season. I'm not rehashing all of this, but he was the starter, and eventually he was no longer the starter. And he sort of lost his job through the thing that over the years in sports we've said is kind of one of the unwritten rules, that you don't lose your job because of injury. We've said that at times over the years. And yet that's what happened, and the result worked out. Georgia won the national championship not because of that, but, concurrent to that decision, Georgia won the national championship. So it clearly worked out. And Daniels never said one word. Was he bothered by all this? My assumption is he probably would. I would have been. If I was JT Daniels, I'd have been furious if all that happened. I'd have been outraged by the fact that this was taken from me through what appeared to be no fault of my own. But Daniels never did. He has every right to, as a competitor, be angry that he lost his job, and every right to go somewhere like West Virginia and play as hard as he can here this year. But the fact that he didn't become a focal point during a national championship season, the fact that he stood back, let all that happen, that's a DGD in my mind. And I feel the same way about Jacob Eason, who in 2017, and that's another guy that lost his job because of injury. And the decision to play Jake Fromm turned out to be the right one. Georgia went on to the college football playoff. I don't believe they ever would have done that with Jacob Eason as quarterback. I just have to be candid here. I don't think that Eason was that kind of quarterback. I think everything that's happened since then is proof of that. But still, if you're Jacob Eason, you don't believe that about yourself. You think you're the best that you possibly can be. And so, that 2017 season when he's not playing, I talked to him in Pasadena, and he said all the right stuff, and it was all, he was just very team first. So in my mind, Jacob Eason's always a good dude, and he's still in the NFL. I think he plays for the Broncos now, I think. I root for him. I'd love to see him have a moment because he did right by Georgia when he had every reason to pout and be mad. And JT Daniels had every reason to pout and be mad, and he didn't. He was cool. And I respect that. So, yeah, I will be rooting for Daniels tomorrow night for that very reason. Lynn Johnson Shipman says, but Jamie Newman's not a DGD at all. No. Jamie Newman, you're right. It will never be in a DGD status. That is, I'm not quite sure what Jamie Newman is, but DGD ain't it. You're exactly right about that. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Thanks for being here. We will see you tomorrow for our R.S. Andrews cool down. We'll have a special guest during the cool down. This is like a shocking new territory for DawgNation. I don't think we've rarely taken guests in the R.S. Andrews cool down, but tomorrow we will. And it's actually going to be a really fun new thing that we're doing. So I'm excited about that. Y'all also check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. Braves, not maybe need to take care of business against the Rockies here this weekend, or I should say this week, obviously with the Mets still playing in L.A. Mets got a very easy schedule coming up. Your chance at the National League East is probably right now. Also, there's a Stranger Things experience coming to Atlanta, which is kind of cool. So much of that series has been filmed here in Georgia, but a new Stranger Things experience on its way to the state of Georgia. Also, the new season of Breakdown, the AJC podcast, that's on its way there too. So a lot going on with the AJC. Check them out online, ajc.com. And our friends at R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on all of that. And we will see you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll talk to you then, everybody.